I'm Congressman Ted Deutch. I represent the 21st District in Congress, and I'm thrilled to be here with my friend and colleague, Representative Garcia. We want to have the opportunity to give you the chance to speak not just to us, but with all of the testimony that's presented here today. We're going to take that back and submit it into the congressional record as part of the official proceedings as we continue to debate these really important issues. I'm a member of the Judiciary Committee, a strong supporter of immigration reform. I strongly oppose the detention bed mandate, and I firmly support alternative detention for those who have committed the civil infraction of crossing into this country. Our nation, a couple of points. Our nation's currently experiencing a humanitarian crisis of unaccompanied children crossing our southwest border. As many as 90,000 unaccompanied kids this year, up to 127,000 estimated next year, fleeing extreme violence in El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala. We have an obligation to treat these kids humanely. We have an obligation to make sure that the system operates the way that it should. And as someone who serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee and speaks with countries around the world about the need for them to take in refugees, it's incumbent upon us to treat people fairly and humanely when they're fleeing violence in Central America and seeking safety in the U.S. That's number one. Number two, I've worked awfully hard to advance efforts to strike the detention bed mandate that requires immigration and customs enforcement to hold more than 34,000 immigrants every single night. The detention bed mandate is, I suggest to you, morally indefensible. It is a waste of taxpayer money. Spending $5.5 million per day, $164 per individual, when alternatives like curfews, telephonic in-person reporting cost 70 cents to $17 a day, don't justify. There's no reason, there's no way to justify the detention bed mandate, and I'll continue to work until we strike that once and for all. And finally, this is the main point. Our nation's immigration system is broken. Comprehensive immigration reform is what we so urgently need. I'm a proud original co-sponsor of Congressman Joe Garcia's bill, H.R. 15, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill in the House, that in many ways mirrors the Senate-passed legislation.
You know, we have an immigration system that is broken, as Congressman Deutch said, and what we're trying to do is work towards a solution. I believe H.R. 15 is going to do that.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Freed. I'm the Executive Director of We Count in Homestead. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the raids that are taking place in Homestead, like many other communities. The immigrant community in Homestead has been terrorized by these raids, and their rights have been violated. ICE agents come early in the morning, 5 o'clock, 5:30, stake out the neighborhoods, knock on doors. They never have a search warrant to look for anyone, and they will do anything they have to get into that home. They will knock until people come in, people open the doors, they will scream at them, they will yell at them, and when people come out to go to work, they will grab them, take the keys out of their pockets and use those keys to enter people's homes. The other thing that happens during these raids is that they will make collateral arrests. They might be looking for one person, but they will take 3 or 4. And it doesn't matter that they're looking for somebody in particular. They will take whoever they can get. Finally, I just wanted to say, as you've heard, this has been traumatic for the whole community, for families in the whole community. Not only for the houses that are raided, as you've heard today, that's been horribly traumatic. But for the whole community, people are really fearful because of ICE and what can happen next. And children are really suffering, in particular, the consequences of that kind of raids that are going on. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Congressman. My name is Myra Rubio. I actually had the pleasure of attending the State of Union with Mr. Joe Garcia, and I thank him for that opportunity, and I know that you are behind your community, and because of this, I want to ask you that you help Brenda in her case. I am blessed enough to come home and help my mother and my father, but she's not. And I think I speak for all of us here and all of our community that it isn't just to be separated from a mother or father, or to have a 5-year-old child sleeping alone in her bed at night. So I want Today I want you to take these stories and make something of them. Make justice for all of our families, and that's what I'm asking you for today. I'm also asking you to please write a letter or make a call to the Lake Detention Center where Brenda's parents are being held and ask for his immediate release. Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Congressman Garcia and Congressman Deutch for this opportunity to testify. My parents moved to the United States from Colombia in 1991 when I was only 3 years old in order to provide a better life for my sisters and myself. They wanted us to live a life free of drugs and violence with a chance of obtaining a world-class education and fulfilling the American dream. For many years, I did not know about my immigration status. However, one thing that was always constant in my life was my family and the importance of an education. I did not learn about my immigration status or the status of my parents until I was in middle school. I remember that at that time, I did not fully understand what it meant or what it would mean to be undocumented in the United States. What I did know during my 13 years of life is that I needed to continue to focus on my education. Education would be the key to success, or at least that is what my naive, non-activist 13-year-old self believed. My father worked nights and my mother worked in the morning in order to make sure that my two sisters and I were never left alone. They understood the meaning of family. My life was going great despite being part of a mixed status family. I was going to graduate with honors from Lake Brantley High School. I was a member of the varsity lacrosse team that was going to the state finals. I had earned the Bright Future Scholarship and I was applying to college. The process of applying to college as an undocumented student meant that I had to jump through an immense amount of obstacles that I unfortunately at that time was unable to overcome. On March 13, 2007, as my mom and I were driving, her to work and I to lacrosse practice, I recall telling my mom that I had a feeling we were about to get pulled over by the police car behind us. I knew my mom did not have a driver's license. I knew that the conversation between the officer and my mom would not be pleasant, but I never imagined what would happen next. I vividly remember as a police officer slammed his gun on the roof of our car as an intimidation tactic. I remember him saying, and I quote, "You should be ashamed of yourself and the example you're setting for your daughter." As I silently sat in the passenger seat, I had to see my mom get handcuffed in front of me and taken away. My mother was sent to Broward Transitional Center, a privately owned detention center 4 hours away from our home. She spent over 4 months in the detention center. I was never able to visit her for fear of being detained. My mother was eventually deported back to Colombia, a country she had not called home in over 15 years. And I had to walk across the graduation stage without my role model, without the rock of our family, without my mother. When did we become a country where in order for me to be reunited with my mother, in order for me to tell her I love her, it must be through a computer camera, or through an advanced parole application that has yet to be approved? When did splitting families become American? As a proud Floridian, I know that this state and this country can do better. While many refer to Disney as the happiest place on earth, I know my happiest place is with my mother, father, and sisters in our home in Florida. This is the only country I have ever known. This is home. I grew up here. I was educated here. I love the United States. My question for you is, when will I be reunited with my mother? Will it be for Christmas, for Mother's Day, for my college graduation, or could it be through my own deportation if my deferred action is not renewed? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ted Deutch. I am 12 years old and I am a U.S. citizen and a future voter. I am here to tell people about the situation that my family lives in. My parents came to the United States more than 13 years ago. My father was a victim of fraud by a man named Oscar Ruiz, who said that he would work for some companies that needed professionals in electronic systems. In 2001, my father went to an interview in which they told him that he was eligible for this job, and all he needed to do was pay a fee to obtain his documents and work legally. Time passed and the man did nothing, so my father lost his legal status. With the time, the savings my parents had ran out, and it was very difficult for them to keep going. My parents told me that my brothers and I have always been a blessing to them. But like every family, there are problems. As long as I can remember, my brothers and I would keep getting sick and would have to be rushed to the hospital. I have lost count of how many times I've ended up in the hospital, mostly because of my asthma. A few years later, the situation became worse. I would have a horrible pain in my joints. Sometimes even walking was too difficult for me. After a lot of visits to many doctors, my mother, my youngest brother, and I were diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. In all this process, my parents were there giving me love, showing me that life is not easy for anyone, but you have to keep going. And that in God, I could find the strength I needed. I don't know what I would have done this whole time without my parents. My parents have been trying to find these solutions to fix their immigration status. 3 years ago, my parents started an immigration process. The results were negative. They consulted and paid for many lawyers, but no lawyer could find a solution. About a month ago, my mother presented herself to the Office of Immigration to ask to be put in the process for deportation in order to see a judge. But even with that, there was no result. If I was 21, I would be able to solve my parents' immigration problem, but I'm not. It is incredible that there is no such thing as a law that protects us minors. The worst part is that there are millions of children in the same situation as me, or even worse. Being a U.S. citizen, I ask them to protect their families, our dreams, and our future. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Samuels. I'm a part of the coalition campaign of the driver license for Florida called Driving Safe in the Sunshine State. I'm here to talk about my brother. My brother Christopher Moses he was detained and sent back to his country, Benin. Moses held a business here. He is a father and has a son that missed his father so much. He has been a business person in this country. He contributed to the American economy by providing business and opportunity to his suppliers. And by creating jobs opportunities, he provides his service pro bono and to many marginalized groups, including the LGBT community and other community of migrants. Unfortunately, without a driver license, he did not have the piece of paper that proved to the authorities what he has proved to the people to care about him. And he was an upstanding American, a modest citizen, chasing the promise of the dream we all been so blessed to pursue. Driver license for the people like Christopher are important. First step is not only making our roads safer, but ensuring that we do not deport talented people in this country and make this country worthwhile of dreaming. My brother, Christopher Moses. Thank you about him for making this decision, Chairman.
The Drama Online Center has been fortunate over the past 3 months to work with 75 children that have come from Central America. We focus first on healthcare and education. We've offered 4 nights a week English classes to these children. They are amazingly dedicated to coming and learning. Our concern right now has shifted to adequate due process. These children have come for safety and family reunification. What we thought we had a year to prepare for their immigration hearings and seeking special juvenile status and refugee status has been expedited, and hearings are coming up around the corner. And we ask you to please help these children be heard and stay with their families that are living and working here in the state. Thank you.
Honorable Congressman Joe Garcia, Congressman Ted Deutch, thank you for taking the time to listen. Detention and deportation is about the inhumanity of permanent family separation with no recourse to family reunification. The psychological trauma is felt mostly by Americans' families left behind. After giving birth to my twins, I suffered a bout of postpartum depression. I was a victim of domestic violence, and I had lost my job, was losing my home, and had 4 minor American children to take care of. I went on a path of self-destructive behavior, leading to 2 shoplifting convictions at age 31 with no priors. A behavior that was and still is shocking to my conscience. 7 years later, ICE showed up at my door. I was detained for a year and deported to Trinidad for 3 years, leaving my 4 American children in the care of my legally blind and disabled mother. My children's lives changed forever. Michelle, age 17, became an adult overnight as a caretaker of her younger siblings. She was on track to graduate high school with her associate's degree and was accepted to the University of Florida to pursue a law degree. Michelle eventually forfeited her dreams and became a parent herself at age 19. Jonathan, age 16, dropped out of high school and started abusing drugs. My twins, Caitlin and Tatiana, who was 6, had to stop all after-school activities. The psychological impact is still felt today with issues of trust, abandonment, fear of me leaving again, and lots of anger. It took years for my children to accept me back into their lives. My twins recently graduated high school with the Associates of Arts degree. It was not until I returned to the U.S. 4 years later, through the advocacy of AI Justice, did Michelle confess that she had attempted suicide. Jonathan shared stories of sleeping days on end in a drug-induced sleep and not caring whether he woke up or not. And my mom, who was a naturalized U.S. citizen, started using antidepressant to combat the mental health symptoms she was now dealing with. I was awakened one day while at detention at 3 a.m. I was placed in shackles and chained to a metal bench at the back of a van, with my hands handcuffed behind my back. Where we drove all day. When night fell, we went to spend the night at a local jail to start the journey all over again. I was moved to 5 different detention centers in a year's time under similar conditions, farther and farther away from my family. Please hear our cries and stop this madness. Ending this inhumane 34,000 detention bed mandate and the deportation of family, not posing a security threat to the U.S. Please take action to stop the destruction of American families. Thank you.
I'm Cheryl Little, Executive Director of Americans for Immigrant Justice, AI Justice. We began helping unaccompanied minors in detention in 1999, and we've been in crisis for 2 years. Last year, we served over 1,600 children in the 2 Miami shelters, and this year so far, we've helped over 1,400. These children flee with good reason. Honduras is the murder capital of the world. El Salvador and Guatemala among the 5 most dangerous countries in the world. In March of this year, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees issued a report, and they concluded that roughly 60% of the children who they surveyed had potential relief for removal from deportation. Our own experience tells us that about 60% of the children we're interviewing these days do as well. So we've been extremely disappointed that this administration has suggested that all of these children should be sent back. Once they arrive in the United States, they're entitled to due process under our laws. With respect to the rocket docket, for a number of years, 2 judges in Miami, 3 or 4 times a month, heard about 20 to 30 cases each time. Now, we have 3 judges, as of a couple of weeks ago, hearing 50 cases each, 150 cases a day. So if children have arrived after May 1, they are part of this expedited docket. The National Association of Immigration Judges has written a very detailed letter urging the government to do the right thing. They believe, judges, the immigration judges themselves do not believe they can provide adequate due process to these children. And they're very concerned that their decisions could be appealed. They're also urging the government to provide some resources for pro bono attorneys. And clearly, our immigration courts need more resources. We need more immigration judges, there's no question about that. Finally, I just want to mention in Artesia, New Mexico, I don't know if you know this, that there are hundreds of moms with their children who've been detained there for some time now. After they pass their credible fear, instead of releasing them, as has been the case in the past, what they're doing is they're setting no bonds or high bonds. And our government is citing a decision from former Attorney General John Ashcroft that basically said we need to keep them in detention for purposes of national security. There's a mass migration, that's a national security issue. That was the same reason used to keep patients in detention after 9/11. And frankly, it's outrageous. I want to reiterate what Tammy said about the need for more resources for immigration courts, for pro bono attorneys. I can tell you as attorneys, we're all going crazy. I'm trying to tell my staff to slow down because I'm so worried about them, but they won't because they're so concerned that if they're not in court every day or in those shelters every day. And by the way, a 3rd shelter with 50 beds for children aged 12 and under is about to open at the end of this month.
Where?
In Miami. I'll tell you when this is over.
My name is Francesco Luengi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Survivors Spotlight Organization. We promote equality, inclusion, and social action for the Latino and the LGBT community. And we've been very fortunate to work with and to have the largest transgender program in the state of Florida. And something that we have seen in this community is the horrendous type of life that these people are having in this country, which is so horrible that this country, which promotes freedom, the pursuit of happiness, and that hope for a better living, these people emigrate here and experience high level of violence, high level of ostracism, marginalization. The stories that we have every day are devastating. Women that are being killed in Latin America, the percentage of killing of transgender women in Latin America is super high. These people have to go through a strong and dangerous journey to come to this country. Once they get to the United States, which they consider is the land of freedom and respect, the only thing they find different is that the chances of being killed in the United States is much less than the chances of being killed in Latin America. But however, they continue experiencing high level of marginalization, extremely high levels of unemployment, lack of services, they don't have access to help, and especially when they are detained in prisons, these individuals experience high levels of rape. They don't have access to continue the transition, so they don't have access to hormone therapy, and they ended up in isolation, which is a very horrible detrimental for them. So thank you. I think what we do is create visibility, and I hope that in some way you might be able to talk about the transgender community, and especially the Latino immigrant transgender community, which are suffering a lot. Thank you.
My name is Christine Ho. I'm an applied anthropologist and professor emerita at Fielding Graduate University.
They cannot hear you, the translator. No, just come close to the microphone.
My name is Christine Ho. I'm an applied anthropologist and professor emerita at Fielding Graduate University. I am also coordinator of the civic-affiliated visitation program, Friends of Broward Detainees. Today I am submitting on record Civic's written testimony, which includes 36 pages on the U.S. immigration detention system. Civic is a national nonprofit working to end the isolation and abuse of people in U.S. immigration detention through visitation, monitoring, and other targeted campaigns. As a network, we conduct nearly 20,000 visits to people over 30 immigration detention facilities across the country. Our network of visitor volunteers provides the only consistent community presence in many of these facilities. The scale of the current U.S. immigration detention system is unprecedented in U.S. history and unmatched in any country. Over 34,000 men and women are held in immigration detention each day. The main complaints Civic receives from people in immigration detention across the country concern the following: prolonged detention, physical abuse, sexual harassment, medical abuse and neglect, arbitrary or overuse of solitary confinement, lack of access to legal representation or to the law library, visitation problems, exorbitant phone call prices, frequent transfers, religious freedom violations, failed nutrition issues, hygiene, detention cleanliness, and unsafe releases. Physical abuse by ICE and its contracted partners, such as Geo-Group, is also concerning. Here at Broward Transitional Center, the quality of food is so terrible, and the amount is so small that about a month ago, some people in detention engaged in a peaceful protest, a sit-in in the central courtyard, skipping several meals. I was told on a recent tour that I led at this facility that the protesters were persuaded to enter the dining room, where they were handcuffed and beaten by GEO staff in riot gear, then sent to Chrome. Such extreme measures in response to complaints about food served to confirm their fears that any complaints would be swiftly punished. It was extremely disturbing to hear such accounts. Such a climate of fear and abuse is unacceptable. Sexual assault and harassment is also concerning. At facilities across the U.S., women who are on their period are often not provided with underwear that fits them. In a special case, a detainee was given extremely large underwear, and when she, we respectfully request that you push for an end to immigration detention, especially with that quota, and eventually to end the entire immigration system.
Glenn Hutchinson. I teach writing at FIU, and I'm a volunteer for the Friends of Miami-Dade Detainees, which is a affiliate of Civic. We've been visiting at the Chrome Service Processing Center, and we've conducted over 200 visits. We also sponsor a phone line for the detainees to call us at no cost to themselves. The men are housed in large open pods with rows of bunk beds. We notice many men report high blood pressure, diabetes, and chronic coughs. Visits are non-contact behind a thick glass, further increasing isolation. Although a few lawyers offer greatly needed pro bono help, most of the detainees I've visited are not able to afford a lawyer. I visited several times with Roberto de Valle, a 64-year-old man who has been held in Chrome since 2009. He was born in Cuba but lived in the U.S. since 1980. He is isolated in an individual cell with little human contact. He can't be deported to Cuba, but ICE won't release him, so he lives in limbo for 5 years. And I've met many others who want to pursue their education and the American dream, but sit in a detention center for months, sometimes years, often without legal representation. During our time at Chrome, we have noted frequent transferring of men. Men may be at Chrome for a month, then transferred to Glades, 2 months later to Monroe County and Key West, and to Baker, even Louisiana, and then back to Chrome. These transfers are stressful. They make preparing a defense almost impossible. And many detainees tell us that the conditions at the other centers are far worse than Chrome. This system separates immigrants from their families. Detainees should not be forced to sit in a prison cell for months and years, often without legal representation. We urge you to expand visiting opportunities for families and reduce the transfers. Please help those whose only offense is pursuing the American dream, like all of us want to do. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Richardson. I'm the Public Policy Director for the ACLU of Florida. And thank you so much for having this event today. And we're very proud to have such strong leadership on immigration issues here in South Florida. From the stories we've heard today, it's very clear that we have 2 humanitarian crises right now. One about the refugees at our border, but also about the 11 million undocumented who are part of our communities and our families that are being ignored by our own government. We call on Congress and the administration to find fair and compassionate solutions for both. First, the refugees at our borders must have fair access to the asylum system and our courts, and that includes access to lawyers. It is meaningless to go before a judge if you do not understand your rights and have an opportunity to make your case. Congress is going to be necessary in that process, though, to provide the resources, and we hope that you're able to act soon. And we also need to make sure that we don't use this crisis as an opportunity to expand beds and facilities for families and children. This would be a very opportune time for those who want to increase enforcement blindly. We know that Congress is stalled and that there are huge political hurdles for you back in D.C. So we ask you to join us in pressuring the Obama administration to do what is within their power. And that means stopping the expansion of family detention centers, which they are currently seeking, reforming enforcement by stopping from asking local law enforcement to hold people without warrant and without suspicion, truly prioritizing enforcement so it's not removing family members who have not committed any criminal acts, and regardless of the effects of their families. And finally, that President Obama find a way to grant relief to families who would be protected under the Senate legislation or are able to demonstrate hardship. Thank you.
I'm the Executive Director of Florida Immigrant Coalition, the Haitian Women of Miami, and the Chair of the Florida Immigrant Coalition. With the U.S. Human Rights Clinic at the University of Miami, and the immigration clinic. I visited Haiti recently, where I saw with my eyes how families are separated and deported to Haiti in complete denial of their rights of due process. One of them died after having been deported to Haiti. Last week, I went to the U.S. Human Rights Network to the frontier of Mexico. I was at the Sonora side where I could take a look at the Sonora Desert, where immigrants, refugees are coming, trying to come to our country. Some of them are children. I could see the trauma that these children and adults in occasions have to suffer when they come here. I went to the morgue, I went to the court, and I saw how the streamlined process treated these refugees. And I'm here to join my voice to the voices of all of those people who are here, just like we heard their voices when I was in Arizona, where we had a tribunal with the U.S. Human Rights Network, where over 50 people testified about how they suffered in our detention centers. So I'm here to join my voices to say this. First of all, we want the Obama administration to stop the deportation of every immigrant who would eventually qualify under comprehensive immigration reform. That's number one. Number two, we want the Obama administration to approve the Haitian Family Reunification Parole. After the earthquake, which killed over 250,000 people in Haiti, there's an Obama promise to help Haiti recover. And yet after 4 years, he had refused to approve the Haitian Family Reunification Parole. Number three, we want all the children who are going through the streamlined process right now to be afforded the most basic right that the U.S. is obligated to give, which is the basic right of due process. These children should not be streamlined. These children are leaving their countries because they are suffering because of trauma, because of violence, and because of our own actions. We need to go to the root cause of immigration problem. We need to know what are some of our responsibilities in creating conditions in Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, and other nations around the world that force these children to come here. And lastly, immigrants have been living here for 30 years. They work, they pay taxes, they contribute to the social, economic, and political fabric of our nation. They need driver's license. I mean, let's be serious. These families are here, women are having children, men go to work, they need to drive. It is smart, it is humane to afford them driver's licenses so that they can get out and live free of fear. Our immigration system is broken. Congress did not do what they were supposed to do to fix it. Then stop the deportations, reunite families, give driver's license, and welcome our children. They deserve our compassion. They deserve our law. Thank you, sir.
Not in accordance with constitutional provisions, international law, or basic human decency. There are several commissions and groups that have asked the nation to change its INS policies. Our nation, which regularly challenges other nations to cease inhumane practices and blatant violations of human rights, cannot then be guilty of the similar or same infractions. I want to finalize this by saying, one set of rules with a fair referee and a just outcome. America has better angels in her nature than this, and we call upon you, our representatives in government, to remind the nation that we are a larger and greater and better nation with more positive angels in our nature. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to serve at the request of the 52 member organizations, many of whom are here. We want to thank you, Congressman Deutch and Congressman Garcia, for being our champions. Not for what you have done, but for what you will do. And we hope that the testimonies you've heard today that break our hearts and energize our livers will strengthen you to become the champions we need in Florida, because Florida benefits from the immigrant communities. I also want to say gracias to the people of Florida, because that is who is here today. Workers of agriculture, tourism, professionals who contribute to the $79 billion of our economy with their blood, sweat, and tears. And it's a shame that not only do they have to work and be exploited at the hardest work at the lowest pay, be abused by police, and then terrorized by La Migra. Those who claim to be for family values are destroying the childhood of a generation of Americans. Those who claim to be fiscal conservatives are squandering precious money to criminalize our families, as Congressman Deutch has said, for profit, for false and unfair incarceration. Those who say they don't want big government have our tax dollars in the middle of the night going after our people. We know that their solutions were part of the Keeping Families Together campaign, were part of the Not One More Deportation campaign, and were part of the Power of the Pen campaign. And we know that at the federal level, we urge you specifically to voice and to unify the voice of the delegation to ask the President for the relief that our families need. We know that the Real ID can be revoked. We're going to work arduously at the state level for driver's license. And we're interrupting the cycle of criminalizations, having counties divorced from the ESCOM and the detainer. Last week, outrageously, the Department of Financial Services, which is supposed to look for the well-being of our state, headed by a Republican, Jeff Atwater of the Rick Scott administration, used our tax dollars to criminalize workers in Naples at a packing house, charging them with felonies, workman's comp fraud, falsely claiming it was a workman's comp fraud, and using false ID with criminal intent. We need to speak out against that now because they will continue using our state resources to criminalize our family. We've spoken about the legal representation. 0.1% of the world refugees is what's coming across our border right now, seeking our refuge. These are children. 9 out of 10 have families or sponsors that can help them with their case. We are working arduously so that 840,000 of the legal permanent residents can build their civic muscle and become citizens. And we ask you to support the Cities for Citizenship program that we're launching. And we will be knocking on more than 20,000 doors in South Dade and Polk County to make sure that the family dividers and the family uniters hear the voice of our people. I thank the movement for social justice. This is a historic moment. We are on the right side of history. This is a period of shame for our country, and because of you and your actions, we're able to uphold our values. And I want to particularly thank Carla Miranda and Maria Ribao and Liz Marie from United Families for bringing us together. Thank you very much.